Governor J.B. Pritzker holding a media availability for the first time in 10 days yesterday up in Chicago. He spoke in front of a legal cannabis industry business group. And then afterwards, he went into another room in a hotel up in Chicago and was peppered by reporters with questions about the migrant crisis. Because, as reported by the Chicago media, 27 migrant buses have come to Chicago just in the past week since last Saturday. We've got now 15,000 new arrival non-citizens in the country, thousands of which could get temporary protected status if they're Venezuelan here before July 31st. And the amount of resources that are being used are growing. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars just in city money that's being used for this, let alone the state dollars that are being used for this as well. So what's going to happen here? How's the governor assisting in this? Is the governor, highlighting the open border and telling the Biden administration to close the border? Or is he standing by the state and the city of Chicago's sanctuary city policies? Because when he was asked about it initially, the governor instantly started talking about how this is Republicans and Republican states not wanting to deal with the migrant crisis, and instead putting them to places like Chicago or New York or LA or some of the other so-called sanctuary cities where they have lax enforcement of federal immigration law. So the governor said, it's Republican governors, it's Republican governors. He was confronted yesterday with the Democratic mayor of El Paso also sending migrants to Chicago. So here's Governor J.B. Pritzker touching on that, touching on the migrant base camp tents that Chicago's planning, and more. So yesterday, Governor Pritzker being peppered with questions about the immigration crisis.
I will say that I think that the mayor of El Paso needs to listen to the cities that he's sending folks to and start thinking about whether or not this ought to be spread across the country. Why is he not sending anybody to Idaho, Wyoming?
Sanctuary cities or sanctuary states.
That's not why they're doing it. That is not why they're doing it. You know that they're doing it because they're sending them to areas where they think that people will take care of them and where people will put the resources forward because this is a humanitarian crisis. But the reality is that states that are controlled by Republicans ought to be offering the same services.
The base camps. I mean, what do you think is a good idea?
I've expressed my concerns about it, and we continue to have conversations about it. I mean, I think it's something that the city, with a lack of existing buildings to put people in, I know the city has looked at this as one of its options. But if you've got buildings available, and I hope that cities will raise their hands and offer assistance. We have provided grant opportunities for cities that will do that, and it's a voluntary endeavor. We're not going to do that unless a city asks us to.
But as a city,
we already have.
And are you helping facilitate any type of shelter outside of the city of Chicago?
When you say facilitate, absolutely. We're helping in every way we can, but you can't just create facilities from nothing, right? I mean, the city is attempting to do that by using Garda-World, but the reality is you've got to find buildings that have facilities for people to use restrooms and other things that will work well and that aren't too very far away from the services that these folks need. So when you think about, let's just move them into the wide open spaces of rural Illinois, that's not going to happen because these folks do need help. And those kids need to go to schools, and some of those schools are not big enough to be able to handle the kids.
You were following...
Just that if we have existing facilities, we ought to use all of those that are willing to do it. Including, by the way, if there are federal opportunities to do that, great. There are federal buildings that don't have anybody in them. We haven't identified any yet, and the federal government hasn't yet. But we've asked them, even if even if it's something that's a bit inconvenient for the federal government, they need to step up to the plate. And I've said that repeatedly to the Department of Homeland Security. Well, they have the ability to help us, and they've offered to help, and so we're going to accept whatever it is that they can offer. I will say that it's not just about money, though, frankly, we do need reimbursement for the dollars that have already been put forward, because we've done an awful lot already without help, a lot of help from the federal government.
Thanks, everybody. We got it.
I just want just to finish the answer. It's not just about money, right? It is also about making sure that we get personnel from the federal government, because this process, and you can see a little bit of it in New York, we're doing it here in Chicago and organizing it. It involves immigration attorneys. It involves filing paperwork for people that haven't already filed paperwork. It involves making sure that we're identifying people's skills and the jobs that they can fulfill when they get the work authorizations. So there's a lot that the federal government can help us with along the way. We're doing it on our own now, but I have asked the department. They have, and the Department of Homeland Security and the White House have both heard from me on this subject.
So Governor J.B. Pritzker again being peppered with questions about immigration with the 15,000 non-citizen new arrivals in Chicago. Obviously, this is an ongoing issue that's draining resources, and even residents in Chicago telling media up there that there's no room. And you're embarrassing Chicago with these policies, but they are sanctuary city policies with lax immigration controls that seem to be an attraction for where these migrants crossing the southern U.S. border ultimately are going to end up. And if you didn't see yesterday on X, Elon Musk was down at the southern border hearing from officials talking about the millions of people who have crossed the border illegally and not having really any true vetting. So criminals, terror suspects, and so on seem to be going unscreened, pouring into the country. Let's take a quick phone call at 217-629-7970. Good morning.
Good morning.
Go ahead.
I just don't understand. Yeah. How many migrants, quote unquote migrants, do you think the city of Springfield could handle? Because it's not out of the question that the governor would look to the capital of the state to lend a helping hand. We've got empty businesses downtown. We got buildings that we could put people in. But the question is, why would we want to? And what happens to these people once they end up in our communities?
Yeah,
I just don't understand. You're just going to throw all these kids in school?
Well, that's something that the governor said. He said, hey, I hope that, people outside of Chicago raise their hand and volunteer, he says. But the idea of just throwing them in the middle of an empty field in rural Illinois is not going to happen because they don't have the facilities, and even like the schools couldn't handle the kids that would have to come, the volume of kids that would have to come. So, yeah, obviously some pretty important questions about resources.
I get that, but when it becomes an emergency, when it becomes something that they can declare an emergency, we've seen what a governor will do in the state of an emergency. He'll mask up your kids and make them go to school. Well, is he now going to make those kids literally just be transplanted into the capital of the state? He doesn't have any other cities he can go to that are not in the borders of the state of Illinois. Well, he's going to have to deal with the cities he's got.
A lot of the suburban areas could be raising their hands and saying, "Hey, we're a sanctuary city. Come join us." But then they're probably going to quickly realize they don't have the resources to handle the influx, because it does not seem to be slowing down in the number of migrants and new arrivals coming to the United States. All right, coming back, we'll hear the governor being peppered with questions about politics. Stay tuned. Hearing Governor J.B. Pritzker being peppered with questions by Chicago media in his first media appearance before members of the press in 10 days. And the governor was hit up with questions about the non-citizen migrant crisis in Chicago and how he's working to manage that with the city or with the federal government. Nothing in what the governor said was close the border. It was more about, we need more resources. But it wasn't the only thing the governor was asked about. He was also asked about the national political scene. So here's the governor talking politics yesterday in front of Chicago media.
It sure seemed as if last night you were watching the Republican debate. Do you wish that you were part of the DeSantis versus Newsom in November?
It seems like I was watching the
From your tweets.
I could just say this. It continues to be a smorgasbord of extremists. They continue to espouse these ideas that have absolutely no place in American society. And these are folks who have no ability to lead this country. Joe Biden has proven that he's willing to work across the aisle to get big things done for people.
Would you like to be part of that November contest between Newsom and DeSantis?
Joe Biden is going to be the next president, as he is our current president, and he's done a tremendous job.
Well, perhaps they're looking at 28. Would you like to be thought of in that group?
Well, I'm not looking at 28. I'm looking at being governor of the state of Illinois. I love this job.
So again, the governor addressing reporters in Chicago about national politics. He says that the menagerie, or what was the term he used about Republicans saying they're espousing extremist views. So clearly, the governor slapping down any kind of assumption that he's looking to become president because of either Biden possibly being impeached or stepping down, or God forbid dies in office. He's advanced age, and there's concerns, of course, about the health of any president. So clearly, the governor doesn't think that anything like that's going to happen, and that Biden's going to be the next president of the United States, as he's the current president. Let's go ahead and take a call at 217-629-7970. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Hey, good morning, Greg. Just a quick question for you. I was wondering, his sister just got awarded, I think, an economic contract to rebuild Ukraine, multi-billion-dollar contract. And I didn't know if there was some behind-the-scene talk where, hey, I'm not going to run for president, and your sister gets awarded this contract. Everybody knows the pay-to-play thing in politics, and so I don't know, just a thought of mine.
Yeah, and pulling up this story here, Penny Pritzker is, associated with this private firm, Reuters reporting U.S. private firms eye Ukraine investment, but Ukraine must reform, U.S. envoy says. U.S. Commerce Secretary Penny Pritzker speaks during an interview with Reuters about what's going on over there. Just the lead of this story says, let me go ahead and flip this over. U.S. private companies would like to invest in Ukraine energy, housing infrastructure, agriculture, transport, and mining, but Ukraine must make reforms in accountability and transparency to make such investments secure, a special U.S. envoy said. So again, U.S. private firms eye Ukraine investment, but Ukraine must reform, the U.S. envoy says. U.S. Secretary of Commerce Penny Pritzker speaking about that with Reuters. We'll see what happens with the national political scene, and in particular, what Illinois' role and Governor J.B. Pritzker's role is going to be in all of this. All right, it is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY. Follow me anywhere, Bishop on Air, on X, previously known as Twitter, on Facebook, or on YouTube, where you can catch all of this action live or afterwards. It's 8 o'clock.
From the Fly SPI Studios, take the easy way out. WMAY FM, Taylorville, Springfield's News and Talk is